Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here. I hope you're having a great day in Jesus. We're going to look at Christianity and the environmental movement, and we're not going to be virtue signaling here today. This is actually a real question because the environmental movement plays such a large role in our lives today. You might say, well, how does it do that? Well, I mean, look at it. You've got like the Green New Deal coming out, retrofitting everything within the next 10 years. You've got different AOGs of different states, attorney generals, AGs in different states suing fossil fuel companies and this type thing for the burning of fossil fuels. You've got right down here in South Georgia, we had people come in. They were making a coal-powered plant a few years ago over towards Blakely, Georgia, and people from out of state came and said, "You're not going to do that." So this affects our. First of all, it would affect our air, but it would also affect our prices. It would affect our heating and air prices. CAFE standards or CAFE standards with that our vehicles have to have certain amounts of mileage per gallon. Now, let me just say this, at really the outset of this, in my heart, I'm a huge environmentalist. Like, I've never shot a deer. I'm not against deer hunting. I have been deer hunting and I saw a deer and I didn't shoot the deer. I've shot birds before, but I like trees. I like nature. I'm one of those people who like to walk around. I like to be in the middle of nowhere. I like to go on hikes with my wife. I enjoy sunsets. And so I'm a nature person. I just really am. My wife just dearly loves animals as well. We saw a joke one time at a barbecue restaurant here a while back. It says, if God wanted us to be vegetarians, why did he make animals out of meat? And I just laughed at that, because I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan. I do eat meat, these type things. And so people go back to Genesis chapters 1 and 2, that mankind has dominion over the earth and Adam was to keep the garden. And I understand that. At the same time, not being an evolutionist, at least not a macroevolutionist, being someone who would say that people are in the image of God, I would say that mankind's health and welfare comes before animals and plants' health and welfare. But on the flip side of that, I don't want any other types of flora, fauna, or animals going extinct. I'm upset that the carrier pigeon is extinct. I'm upset that the dodo bird is extinct. And, some of these other animals. I think that's a tremendous tragedy. So there's got to be this balance in Christianity and the environmental movement. Now, along with the environmental movement, you would get into like climate change. Climate's always changed. I find it humorous that people just use the pejorative term climate denier. I've never met anyone who ever denied there's a climate. Of course, there's a climate. What they would mean is climate change denier, but it doesn't have the same rhetorical force to inflict damage and hurt upon people. So they just say, you're a climate denier. I don't doubt that the climate does change. The question would be is on anthropogenic. Is it caused by mankind? Anthropology, mankind. Does mankind play any part in this? And is there any kind of cooking the books in these type things, such as setting up the temperature gauges in heat islands and all of this? And what role does sunspots play in this, which scientists are finding out that it plays a major role? And is there any underlying political agendas underneath global warming? Does it have something to do with subversion of capitalism and the increase of government control? These are all things you look at. Now, from a creationist, a young earth creationist point of view, I would say that it's quite possible that global warming is happening slightly in that after the flood, classical young earth creationism would say that this is where what's known as the ice age is. We would say there was a singular ice age, and it was the flood waters receding after the flood in the wintertime, freezing. Salt water freezes at 15 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 32, but it still freezes. The flood waters receding and this type thing, and gradually receding ever since, for the last 4,000 plus years. And so that the polar ice caps would be a direct result of the flood of Noah. And there was a time where there was no polar ice caps. And this would be the easy explanation of to why there's megafauna, animal fossils, and all this underneath the polar ice caps. And so with that possible recession still occurring around the world, this would be why glaciers are receding, and this is why the polar ice caps would be receding, even though they do come and go, the polar ice caps. And some of the sensational things like the polar bears and stuff are now seen to be that this is how polar bears have traveled. And this goes back to cognitive ease, that when our particular tropes and understandings are disrupted, we tend to automatically reject them. And so, the polar bears floating on pieces of ice, they're just getting from point A to point B, or massive pieces of the ice shelf breaking off. Occasionally that's happening because the ice, just study it for yourself, is because the ice is actually increasing so much that it breaks off part of the shelf, the ice shelf, and this type thing. And like oil, there's a huge debate, and I may do another video just specifically on this, on whether oil is abiotic, which is from non-living. Is it really a fossil fuel? Or if there really are tectonic plates, and see Walt Brown in the beginning, you'll see what I'm talking about there, are we kind of taking out the lubrication from the tectonic plates? That maybe not all these are just the remains of animals like the La Brea tar pit kind of thing, but possibly this is something there that was created by God, and that could be the reason wherever you have heavy fracking, that you have heavy earthquake activity as well many times. Of course, we'd be totally against the polluting of rivers. There is that dynamic tension between capitalism and the good that capitalism does. That's a whole other subject, the good that capitalism does, but the pollutive aspects. I'm old enough, I'm 53, I can remember when, like in the city of Atlanta or LA, we traveled around when I was young, horrific smog, and Pittsburgh, and just dirty cities, let's just face it, because steel mills and stuff now. And now when you go to various cities, because gas is cleaner and because there are environmental standards, things are better, and I'm thankful. And you can remember, some of you too, when it was nothing to see people throw trash on the interstate, that if you drove down the interstate, there was trash everywhere. And now that's the exception rather than the rule. You almost never see trash, even on back roads and stuff. It's almost non-existent. And for that, I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful. So the Christian and environmental movement, I guess the biggest thing we'd have to do is no, we don't want the rewilding of America, the 1491 Project, and World Wildlife Fund, trying to hinder mankind's progress. At the same time, we do need to make very great decisions on the environment. Look, we're dependent on trees. We breathe in the oxygen they're breathing out. And so you cut down all the trees, you've killed yourself. You get rid of the honeybees. You get rid of the bees, whichever, whether it's cell phones, some have speculated cell phone tower, some have speculated other chemicals and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, you're looking at a collapse of the human species, which is a very bad thing. So Christians in the environmental movement, I think it's all a matter of degrees, that we have to put God first, and then those that are in the image of God next, and then the environment next. Even Jesus would say, you're better than many sparrows, you're better than this, and he would not equate us with animals and plants and all of this. That mankind does have it's not the descent of man as in Darwin's second book. So God bless. I love you. Just keep living for Jesus. And we're looking for a day, we have to remember, Jesus, the ultimate environmentalist, when the millennium comes and then the new heavens and the new earth, everything's fine then. And that's really a great time. That's the ultimate environmentalism. God bless. I'll talk with you later in Jesus' name.